reading this live chat, some of you are wild. Did I just read that correctly? Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to our Tuesday night live stream for Week 4 of the 2024 fantasy football season. Over the course of the next hour plus, I'll be answering fantasy football questions. When you do type in a question, please be sure to include your scoring format: standard, half PPR, full PPR. The more context in regards to the format that you play in, the easier it'll be for me to answer your question. Now, some of the live chat questions. I mean, okay, so first and foremost, Michael in the chat said, Mahomes or Darnold this week? Listen, I get it. I understand. And I could justify it. We'll wait till Thursday. Somebody had asked me in the live chat if they were willing to, what to do with Rashad White, Bucky Irving. Should I play Chuba Hubbard this week? Yes. These rankings are up to date as of earlier today. We were posted. I would play Chuba Hubbard over both of them. But then there was a question, like Anadi had sent in a question to even before the stream started. He said, what are we doing with Coleman? Should I drop him to pick up a Dunze? Yeah, let's pick up a Dunze. That's great. But then there was somebody saying that they were going to drop Patrick Mahomes in order to pick up Jaden Daniels. My whole question is, why wasn't Jaden Daniels already rostered in your league after week 1? Now, that's besides the point of dropping Mahomes. Mahomes has to be traded, or you have to hold him. One or the other. Cannot drop him. That's against my religion. Couldn't do it. You couldn't see me do it. But either way, let's get into answering some of these questions, shall we? We had a question that came in from Diego. Diego, thank you very much for the super chat. Diego says the following. In a 2QB PPR league, I have Dak Prescott, Aaron Jones, Dak Prescott, Aaron Jones, Ford, 4, as in this is a trade, Baker, Jacobs, JSN, Aubrey. It's interesting how valuable Brandon Aubrey has become to where he quite literally is a trade piece in multiple trades. The volume of times that people tell me via Patreon, via comment section, via DMs, all this kind of jazz, that there's a trade that they have that involves Aubrey is ridiculous. Anyway, to answer your question, in a 2QB league, PPR, I prefer Dak over Baker. I think as of right now, Jones and Jacobs have comparable value. So then it's just a matter of do you prefer to have Ford, JSN, or Aubrey? I mean, honestly, in this circumstance, long term, I think Jacobs is going to find greater value. If you need that wide receiver help with JSN and you need a better kicker, I don't mind the trade, but that's only because Ford eventually, his value is going to dissipate with the return of Nick Chubb. And it's an eventually thing. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when in this circumstance. So I don't mind the trade, but again, you'd have to be super desperate for wide receiver. And I don't know if JSN's the answer. I think I'd probably just hold on to what you have as of right now, Diego. I don't think there's a force to be made in terms of that kind of a trade. What does it say? Half PPR. This is another Diego asking a question. Says, start Zay Flowers, Adunze, Shakir, or Yoshi Boss. Tomorrow, wide receiver video will be out, but in no circumstance am I ever benching Flowers. I think Flowers is just too valuable. Ultimately, I understand that he doesn't... There's going to be inconsistencies of play. It's going to happen, right? Obviously, this last week was very much so reliant on the running game of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry leading them to the promised land. And the only receiver that really found themselves in abundance of success, perhaps were just, Rashad Bateman. But going forward, I think it's still very difficult not to start him. I understand that obviously all three of those other players are coming off of great weeks, but I think Zay Flowers is the best option of the bunch. Let's see here. Should I just drop Ravens defense and roll with Seattle rest of the season? Let me check what the Ravens schedule looks like. Ravens schedule. And also, I'll check out the Seattle schedule just to kind of compare them side by side at the moment. Okay, so looking at the upcoming schedule for Seattle, can't play them this week, not against the Lions. Then the following week is the Giants, pretty solid play, but then you have the 49ers, Falcons, Bills, Rams. So ultimately, I don't really trust that I can play the Seattle Seahawks defense every single week. As for the Ravens, yeah, I don't trust them either, playing against the Bills, the Bengals, the Commanders, the Buccaneers. In the next couple weeks here, again, all of them have relatively solid offenses to the extent to where I would be afraid. Honestly, in your position, I'd probably just run with playing a different defense every week, just rolling a different, player in that, or different defense every week in that circumstance, just off of streaming. I don't think I'm going to commit to a singular defense unless something is far greater is available. Super chat sent in from YG. He says, is ETN a buy low? Absolutely, yes. But here's the thing. If you're buying low on him, you have to understand that if they don't start winning games, he's not going to change his production level, right? I talked about this in the preseason. I don't know, one of those running back tier list videos that I did. I don't know which one it was, but I specifically mentioned like ETN last season when they were in winning scripts in which they won those games in comparison to the games in which they lost. It was a difference between him averaging like 18 fantasy points or 10 fantasy points, right? So that is the difference, and that's what we've seen thus far. They are not winning games. They cannot run the ball. They are not getting themselves into situations in which they can consistently run the ball. Therefore, he doesn't have as much potential for upside. And if we think that they're going to somehow turn it around in the not too distant future, then great, he's a buy low. But otherwise, if you are going to go after him, you have to understand that his value is very much so contingent on the winning nature of that team. And Jacksonville does not look like a winning team. They look like a team that's going to lose their coach because they're going to fire him in the next couple weeks here. Thinking of giving Monty for ETN and Dobbs. Yeah, I think I'd keep Monty as right now. Jeremy Vincent says, how we doing in the leagues, bro? Anybody you were big on that busted? Anybody you avoided but boomed? Anybody that I was big on that busted so far? Look, here's the thing. Like, for someone to be a bust, I think the whole 18 weeks of the season has to surpass, right? Like, so far, Laporta hasn't done anything, right? But it doesn't mean that he's an objective bust, right? Because we still have an additional 14 games of structure here that is going to get him back on track. So I don't know if there's anything that's like, as of right now, shocking. It's still very early to designate players one way or the other, booms or busts. Obviously, players like Chris Godwin having them, scored a touchdown each of the first 3 weeks, beautiful. We'll love to take, we'll take that and run with it. Which obviously is a player that was lower ranked amongst kind of the consensus and for myself. So those kind of things we'll take. I'll take the surprises, but outside of that, nothing crazy so far. Nel Santiago sends in a question, says, hey bro, currently have Richardson, so I need a quarterback in a PPR 12-team league. Available options are Fields, Geno, Dalton, along with Darnold and Rodgers. Okay, in a 12-team league, the upcoming matchups for the Seattle Seahawks are really enticing, especially once they're going to be more competitive matchups. Like this last week, obviously Geno Smith didn't have as much fantasy upside, primarily because, again, they were up so many points and just ran the clock out against the Miami Dolphins, who cannot stop the run. So I think Geno Smith is in the next coming weeks here with those given matchups is pretty promising. Outside of that, I think Justin Fields as well. I mean, taking on this week, if I'm not mistaken, what do they have? Indianapolis. And then again, that defense is terrible. And then the following week, I think they have Dallas, which again, that defense is also terrible. So I don't mind Geno or Fields. If I was to pick one of the two, I'd probably lean in the direction of Geno just ever slightly. But I could justify playing either of the two. Thank you, Nels. Appreciate it. Hope you're doing well. All right, let's see here. We had a question that follows up from YG, who says, could Michael Wilson be fantasy relevant this week? Why not? Listen, if Trey McBride is going to be missing this week, then absolutely Michael Wilson is going to be relevant. Again, they're going to have to throw the ball 30 plus times in Arizona in order to beat the Washington Commanders. Or I don't know if it's in Arizona or if it's in Washington. I would venture to say that it's probably in Washington because Arizona is not going to have 3 home games in a row. But nonetheless, in this circumstance, yes, I'd be willing to say that Michael Wilson, in the absence of Trey McBride, would absolutely be relevant, and he would still be a pretty solid top 40 wide receiver option in that circumstance. But again, very much so contingent on the absence of McBride with the concussion protocol. Chris Espinoza sends in a question. Thank you, Chris. Says, trade Hall, Quentin Johnston for Walker, Shaheed, Cooper, Superflex League. I don't know if I love that, to be honest. Look, Shaheed, in my opinion, again, he dropped a touchdown. He could have very easily had himself a 30-yard plus receiving touchdown, made his entire week on one singular play, but that's the kind of player he is. He is either going to make his week on a singular play or not. It's a coin toss. It's either he does it or he doesn't do it. And even though he'll have multiple opportunities of being able to find that success, once he doesn't, again, it will burn just like this last week where he gets 5 targets, 0 receptions, etc. So in this circumstance, giving away Hall, not too interested in it. I get maybe you want to have more wide receiver depth, but I don't know if Cooper's the answer in this circumstance, especially with Walker if you don't have Charbonnet. Looking at your team, it says your running backs are Bijan, Hall, Chubb. My wide receivers are Collins, Kupp, and I have no wide receiver depth. Yeah, I can justify it, but bringing in Walker without Charbonnet really would hurt in this circumstance, Chris. I would try to see if you can pair up another trade. Maybe if you're looking to try to get wide receiver depth, right now I think is a really good time to buy on Mike Evans. The last 2 weeks of production have been very, I would say, underwhelming to say the very least, based on matchups, based on circumstance. So going into this upcoming weekend's matchup against the Eagles and then so on and so forth after, he will continue to be the normal Mike Evans that we all know over the course of the past decade. So that's somebody that you could potentially go after, but also still try to get a running back piece that once you lose Hall in this overall equation, you're still somewhat relevant there. So an RB2 and a Mike Evans, and see if you can make a trade of that capacity. Otherwise, I'm not sure if I love this trade right now. All right, let's see here. Question from Proud on Film says, PPR, drop worthy for Hubbard or Odunze. Yeah, we were talking earlier today. Sorry I didn't respond. Again, I knew I had to hop on the live stream. Bowed. So here's the deal. If you drop... Would I like to drop worthy for Hubbard? If you see yourself in the coming weeks needing to play Hubbard, like for example, if you look at the running back rankings video I put out today and you see, all right, he would theoretically start for you for the next couple weeks here, then I'd be willing to make that move. Otherwise, long term, the play is Odunze. Because Worthy, obviously, in that offense, not functioning to the extent that we may thought of. I mean, honestly, nobody is functioning in that offense outside of quite literally Rashee Rice. So unless Patrick Mahomes completely flips a 180 on the kind of games that he's been playing as of late, obviously 2023 and thus far into 2024, very similar production from Mahomes every single week. Pretty much a 16-point quarterback, doesn't have much upside outside of that. The occasional circumstance it will take place, but ultimately, yeah, I mean, Odunze is the long-term play if you can make the move. Thank you. Let's see here. Ray sends in a question, says, should I trade Richardson? I have Josh Allen, Geno Smith, Andy Dalton, and I need a wide receiver. Who do you suggest? Again, if you can somehow knock on the door of Mike Evans and somehow bring him back, that's something that I'm very much so interested in making a deal for at the moment. If I was to look at potentially other wide receivers, look, here's the way that I see it. If you can, if you need immediate wide receiver production and you can't mess around, you can't wait a couple weeks, right? So you can't, like, for example, trade for Waddle, then wait a couple weeks for Tua to come back and then eventually find value. If you're not in that kind of a business, I'd also suggest trying to buy low on Jaden Reed right now. Again, the return of Jordan Love is only going to elevate his potential for value. Who's another wide receiver that honestly is going to have value? Let's look at this entire board. I'm trying to buy low. I'm not trying to buy high on any of these players. So I'm trying to go after players that had kind of poor weeks here that unfortunately didn't live up to their potential, but eventually will be able to do so. So I'm always in the business of trying to go after George Pickens, to be totally honest. Who's another wide receiver on this list? I think that's pretty good. That's like 3 or 4 names there. Try to see if you can knock on those doors and see what comes of it. Let me look at what else. What other names are there? Brandon Ayuk, I'm always still knocking on that door still. AJ Brown, I'd knock on that door, but again, that's very much so dependent on whether or not you need a wide receiver value right now rather than the next couple weeks. Very much so dependent on what kind of roster you've constructed thus far and how it kind of sits. Thank you, Ray. Appreciate it. Let's see here. Itoza sends in a question. Says, prioritize Bucky Irving or Chuba Hubbard. Long term, it's Bucky Irving. Short term, it's Chuba Hubbard. So if you are in need of a running back, honestly, if you had Jonathan Brooks, right, I'd say, yeah, Chuba Hubbard's solid. But I think in the long term, Bucky Irving is going to be more valuable for fantasy purposes because, again, he's going to get more utilization within the backfield and quite literally looks like the better running back of the two between him and Rachaad White thus far. Just his elusiveness, his ability to make the play out of absolutely nothing. When he's supposed to go ahead and gain 3 yards and there's 4 defenders around him, somehow makes everybody miss and gets an extra 6. Like there's things that he's doing, and he's a special talent. So to the point to where, yeah, long-term Bucky Irving, short-term under the assumption you've got like Taylor, Henry, Hall, you've got monster running backs, and you're just like, hey, I need to pick up a short. I wouldn't even suggest Chuba Hubbard. The only reason I would ever pick him up at this point is if you need maybe a starting running back that's like a top 24 option for the next 3 weeks until, of course, Jonathan Brooks takes over. Thank you. Vout on Film says, drop Worthy or Deontay. Worthy for Deontay or Mooney. I'd 1,000%, no questions asked. I drop it for Deontay Johnson. Yeah, for sure. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next question here. Let me go ahead and let me filter this again. For those of you who are joining us tonight, welcome. Hope you guys are doing well. Again, we're going to be answering questions for, I don't know, when did the stream start? Like 7:30 until like probably 8:30, 8:45-ish. So if you guys are going to ask a question, do me a favor. Add your scoring format to it. Greatly appreciate it. And of course, make sure to click the like button. Thank you. All right, let's see here. Adam Amar sends in a question. Says, I got Kamara, Brian Robinson Jr., Eckler, Zeke, Zamir. Drop one. Yeah, I'm either dropping Zeke or Zamir. If I had to make a definitive statement in this situation, I'd be more comfortable just dropping Zeke. I do not care for it. Honestly, if it was me, I'd drop both Zeke and Zamir. off of your team, but I'd like to have some sort of depth in this scenario, so Zeke would be the guy. Thank you. Nathan Dennison says, are we picking up Shakir over Jennings? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Look, Jennings, again, once we get the return of Deebo Samuel and George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, etc., and of course we get Ayuk to being the normal Ayuk, the guy that has been on this roster for the last couple of years, Jennings is going to go back to being that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 on that, number 4 or 5 option within the offense effectively. Obviously, his efforts as of late are great, but going forward in terms of long-term value, Shakir is the number 1 wide receiver as it stands for the Buffalo Bills offense, which we would obviously want a piece of. Let's see here. Jacob sends in a question, says, traded Neighbors, Andrews, and Hunt for Puka Nacua, Travis Kelce, and Connor. Need an RB2, still have J-Jet. I also have Marvin Harrison, had Pacheco go down. Okay, so you're traded Neighbors, Andrews, Hunt. Okay, so Andrews, again, is in a shambles situation. Hunt, he did get elevated to the 53-man roster, so he's going to have effective value until, of course, Pacheco returns. And then you send away Neighbors, who, again, is on some ridiculous stuff as of late. But you get Puka, you get Kelce, you get Connor. So Puka probably won't return until week, I want to say 7 or 8, based on, of course, injured reserve, upcoming bye week, etc. You're getting Puka, Kelce, Connor. Yeah, look, in the long term, Kelce should be a better tight end than Andrews. Puka should be a better wide receiver than Neighbors. And Connor is going to blow out, the doors off of whatever Kareem Hunt's production looks like in the next couple weeks. So in the long term, it's the best trade that you could have possibly made. I don't even know how you got away with making a trade of that caliber, but hey, congratulations. We'll take it. Thank you. Sayil sends in a question, says, I'm 0-3 currently. I have Bijan and DJ. Sorry, it's not even that you have him. You're potentially trading him. Bijan Robinson, and DJ Moore for James Cook and Chris Godwin. I don't know if I can make that trade. Look, there's the thing. James Cook has been good, but James Cook rushing touchdowns are not as common as you wait. Okay, look, maybe there's a complete different shift to how this offense is going to function, but Josh Allen rushing touchdowns will reappear. And when they do, they're going to negatively affect James Cook to a pretty high capacity, to the point to where there are going to be weeks where he scores single-digit points, and you should not be surprised about it. Now, as for making this trade in which you're giving away Bijan Robinson for the alternatives, man, I think I stick with what you have. I know you're 1-3 and you want to shake it up. I think you keep it and you let it ride. Thank you. Seta sends in a question. Says, traded James Conner and Marvin Harrison Jr. for Bijan Robinson. Thoughts? I'd say you gave up a bit too much. Yeah, I'd say you gave up a bit too much. The way that James Conner looked last week, obviously, makes you think lesser of him. But as a player thus far over the course of since last week, prior to last week, so if you eliminate week 3 of the 2024 season, and you go to week 13 of 2023 to week 2 of 2024, the guy was averaging over 21 fantasy points per game and a half PPR. So I think perhaps gave up too much, but let's hope that, Bijan elevates to the level in which, of course, he's able to earn the value that you traded away for him. Let's see here. Shibu sends in a question, says, London plus Love for Ayuk and Daniels. London and Love. Yeah, that's fine by me. I mean, if you're playing in a 4-point per passing touchdown league, Jaden Daniels is very much so valuable because of the rushing upside that he has, on top of the fact that, of course, he looked great last night. But, again, the stat that I read earlier this morning was that last night's game was the first game since 1940 in which both teams didn't punt the ball, which is unbelievable. So, pretty ridiculous. I think there was another aspect to that stat that I read, but I honestly, off the top of my head, cannot remember it. But pretty ridiculous game. Now, as for the trade as a whole, rest of season value, Love and Daniels can be very similar, especially if Jordan Love goes back to being his 18.5 point self, which again, he demonstrated for majority of the back end of last season, and he already, demonstrated in week 1 of this year. London versus Ayuk, obviously, London has the current advantage, but in the long term should be very similar value. So I don't mind the trade. I think it's relatively it's a horizontal move rather than a upgrade per se. I think it's solid across the board. Easy E sends in a question. Thank you, Easy. Says, drop Brian Thomas Jr. for Dell, Udunze, Mooney, Yoshivas. As it currently stands, I'd like to, if you could, have all of these options on your bench. I think Okay, so here's the thing. I think Dell could have himself a monster. Dell should have himself a monster week. We saw what Jacksonville's defense is capable of. They are quite literally capable of nothing. They were wet paper towels yesterday, and not the good kind. I'm talking about one ply, some terrible stuff. That defense was getting torched across the board. So it would not surprise me if Tank Dell had himself a huge week here in week 4, based on how Jacksonville matchup is going to kind of pan out here. Now, as for the other alternative options, BTJ, Odunze, Mooney, they're all getting opportunity. Obviously, you might want a player that is going to have more opportunity or in a higher scoring offense effectively. But unless you're getting Dell, BTJ is probably the guy that I keep. But the Dell thing is very much so dependent that he has a great week here, and then my prediction is correct. Big Cat sends in a question, says, trade Ramondre Stevenson and Cooper Kupp for Christian McCaffrey and Rachaad White. Cooper Kupp won't return until a week 7 or 8. Ramondre will be fine as a top 24 back. I can't guarantee the same thing for Rachaad White going forward. I think he'll be a little bit less value, perhaps a top 30, but closer to 30 than Ramondre in that scenario. So you're basically just trading in terms of getting the value of Christian McCaffrey. I would only say that this is a okay trade for you to make if, in fact, you have Jordan Mason. If you do, I'm fine with it. Otherwise, I think getting Christian McCaffrey after the news that he went to Germany in order to kind of get like stem cells in his Achilles in order to kind of recover, it's very much so tricky to the point to where maybe Christian McCaffrey doesn't return when we anticipate him to, which could be very much so a detriment to this overall trade by losing the value in which you do. If you don't have Mason and you're going to trade for McCaffrey, you better have a trade in line already prior to making the trade to where you're immediately going after and getting Mason. Otherwise, I don't know if I make that deal. Rusty Wright sends in a question, says, I finally found a trade. Can send Kyler or Jaden Daniels for Deontay Johnson to hold over with Kupp and Hill out of service. Currently, my wide receivers are Amari Cooper, Odunze, Worthy, Worth it. Deontay Johnson long-term, I would hope, could have sustained value. The question is he going to be good enough? And let's say, for example, something happens to Dalton. Deontay is cooked. And then at that point, we're in a lot of trouble. But you're giving away potentially Murray or Jaden Daniels for it. Again, I'd say, listen, if that's the best you can get, I'd even wait another week and hold on to what you have and start a waiver wire option because I think you deserve more in return for that quarterback compensation. I'm knocking on the doors of Jaden Reed, perhaps even Mike Evans right now. See if you can potentially vie for one of those two options. Thank you, Rusty. Big Cat sends in a follow-up, says, should I try selling Hubbard and Njoku for Kelsey? Yeah, listen, again, Hubbard, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when Jordan Brooks returns and then they start to ramp up Jordan Brooks. He is going to be fantasy relevant, or at least to a point to where Hubbard isn't going to have the full backfield to himself. It's not to say that Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks both can't coexist within the backfield, because they certainly can if, in fact, the Carolina Panthers offense can be effective enough in those circumstances. But I would say that, yes, I think it's probably in your best interest to make a trade of that capacity. I still have hope that Kelsey's somehow going to wake up from the nightmare that he has put us in. Michael sends in a question, says, in a 12-team half PPR 2-flex league, we have Jalen Hurts, Achane, Dowdle. Wide receivers are Hill, A.J. Brown. Andrews is my tight end. Flex is Ayuk. Addison is on my bench. Do I trade Jalen Hurts and Achane for ETN? Is that Cole Kmet, I think? Because it says D. Kmet. So I'm assuming that's Cole Kmet instead of DK. So ETN, Cole Kmet, Goddard, and Purdy. Do I trade Hurts and Achane for ETN? Okay, hold up. If that's DK Metcalf, yeah, it is DK Met. All right. Because when you put Kmet and then you put it, yeah, anyway. So to answer your question, yes. Give me the haul that you're bringing in, I'm interested in that. I think your roster needs it. You're lacking a lot of depth across the board, and I think it addresses all those positional needs, Michael. So I'd make that trade. Thank you. Prohibit sends in a question. Thank you, Prohibit. Says, traded Olave plus Rachaad White for Kyron today. I don't know how you managed to do that. But congratulations. Firm handshakes there, Prohibit. Congratulations. Xander O'Malley sends in a question. Says, in a full PPR, I have great wide receivers, but Shakir is on the waiver. I have zero backups. I have zero backup backs, however. Got it. Do I prioritize Shakir due to the upside, or do I go for Bucky Irving with no backups? Unless you think you're going to take Shakir and trade him for a better running back than what Bucky Irving presents, then you would pick up Shakir. Otherwise, it is Bucky Irving. Yeah. So unless you unless you think you can potentially put together a trade in which you can get more running back depth in exchange for Shakir, or perhaps you may be in a situation where you're like, okay, if I pick up Shakir, he gives me more stability at wide receiver, therefore I can take my wide receiver 3 or 4 and move one of them for a running back that is a better option than Bucky. If you believe that you're capable of accomplishing something of that extent, your league is more open to trading, then that would be the suggestion. Otherwise, just pick up Bucky Irving and get yourself a little bit more stability at running back, especially considering, again, bye weeks begin next week, and there are going to continue to be injuries that, obviously put us in tough situations. So you want to have that running back depth on tap. Matthew Wallace sends in a question, says, Dallas, Minnesota, Las Vegas, New Orleans, Chicago defense this week. Thanks. As it currently stands, if I look at the upcoming schedule for week 4, of the available options, okay, so Dallas versus the Giants, the Dallas defense typically should completely buzzsaw through that, through the New York Giants, but I don't believe it at this point. Dallas needs to prove it rather than anything, because again, the last 2 weeks has been disastrous for them. So would I be willing to start any of these other defenses? Minnesota and New Orleans. Again, I'd probably, in terms of long-term value, based on how both of them have played, I'd be perfectly happy with either of the two. I think Minnesota's the priority. New Orleans is second. I'm not going to trust Las Vegas defense. That was an absolute shit show of a showing. So I would probably rank it going into this week: Minnesota, New Orleans, Dallas, Chicago, Las Vegas. That's the order that I would play it in going into this upcoming weekend's matchups, if you're looking just for a pick up and play start kind of situation. Thank you. Richie Boy sends in a question, says, Fab, dump, Odunze or Deontay Johnson rest of the season. I have 100 total Fab. As it currently stands, if you need the wide receiver depth, I'd be willing to go as far as potentially like 17% for both. Obviously, I think I want to prioritize Deontay Johnson more, primarily because, again, we do know that Adam Thielen is going to the injured reserve, and Odunze still has the threat of Keenan Allen returning. He has the threat of Keenan Allen returning, on top of the fact that Cole Kmet's had a monster week. DJ Moore is still active in that offense, and yes, Odunze is great. He's a top 10 drafted wide receiver. The history of success at the wide receiver position over the course of the last 5 seasons of the NFL and fantasy football suggests that he is going to be a top 36 wide receiver, but Deontay is probably the more valuable of the two. If you need like a top tier wide receiver and you think there's probably going to be a lot of noise in the direction of Deontay, it's probably like 20. We're probably dumping a good chunk here, to the extent to where we're probably, 17% for like a Odunze I think is safe. You think you could pretty easily get him on that point, but I think it might require Deontay to you might have to literally put 23, maybe 24% to 26%, something like that. If you were like, hey, Andrew, I don't have Kupp, I don't have A.J. Brown, Ayuk is killing me, and my other best wide receiver is Ridley, I'd be like, all right, let's drop 30% and let's fuck off with it. You know what I mean? Like, let's just dump a chunk of the mag and not even worry about it. But that's only in those kind of circumstances. Thank you. Andy says, rest of season, rather have Bucky Irving or Rico Dowdle. As it currently stands, I trust the Tampa Bay offense more, honestly. And Rico Dowdle very much so is not going to have touchdown upside, where Bucky Irving could begin to steal those opportunities from Rachaad White going forward. So I'd probably rather have Bucky going forward. Thank you. Jordy Peasy sends in a question. Says, in a half PPR, I'm currently 1-2. My team consists of Anthony Richardson, CeeDee Lamb, Marvin Harrison, Montgomery, Swift, Hunter Henry, Olave, Ingram, Javonte, Warren, Brooks, Shaheed. Okay, so as it currently stands, Swift, Javonte, Warren, all shit shows, complete disasters, killing you. So we need a running back too, and we need it now. Jonathan Brooks is a couple weeks away, but probably in a situation where, damn, dude, I think you might have to wait. Because here's the thing, I don't want to sell CeeDee Lamb, Marvin Harrison, Montgomery. Or Olave. I don't want to sell any of those players. They're all great. They're going to fill in as your starting like primary pillars of your team. I think as the weeks progress here, you might have to go out and pick up Roschon Johnson in order to ensure that you have all the value of Swift in case he loses the job outright. I think you're also in the business of keeping your 2 tight ends and just waiting until Ingram comes back, because once he does, he will have immense value. But you're just waiting on picking up potential running backs, hoping that they hit until Jonathan Brooks returns in week 5, which is technically once he comes off the IR. So it's kind of a patience game, which sucks, but it's mainly because the rest of your pieces are too valuable to kind of give up unless you're going to get back a lot of value in exchange for them. Old J Running sends in a question and says, should I make the following pickups and drops. Drop 49ers and pick up the Vikings. Drop Shaheed and pick up Shakir, and drop Downs for Mooney. Yes. Yeah. I think I'd be more willing to... Okay, so... I think I'd give Shaheed a little bit more time. The way that I see it, OJ running, I drop the 49ers for the Vikings. That's fine. And then I drop Downs for Shakir as the number one priority, and I keep Shaheed. So number one priority, pick up Khalil Shakir, drop Joshua Downs. Number two priority, pick up the Vikings, drop the 49ers, and leave it as such. I'd keep Shaheed for another week. Let's just see what he's capable of. I think he still has a lot more in the tank. Again, very easily could have caught that touchdown and scored, and we would have no complaints. So just leave it as is. Adam Amar sends in a question, says, 12-team half PPR. I'm currently 2-1, and I got Hurts, JJ, Ayuk, Kyron, Mason, Andrews, Brian Robinson, Eckler, Bigsby, Pickens, Mooney, Brandon Cooks, Justin Tucker, and the San Francisco defense. Any moves to make? By the way, you're only dropping the 49ers defense this week because you want long-term value. This is the old J running, by the way. Otherwise, they got a pretty good matchup against the New England Patriots this week, which, again, doesn't really require that you have to make the swap there. But anyway, as for Adam Amar, based on what you have on roster, again, I'm going to continue to suggest that you trade away Mason in order to kind of cash in on the value of that, or at least try to trade for the potential of Christian McCaffrey. If you're not able to do that, then trading him away is probably the best plan of action in order to kind of recoup some value there. Outside of that, again, you have Bigsby, which is a handcuff, Brandon Cooks, which is not valuable. You have Pickens and Mooney, which are solid, I guess, wide receiver threes going forward, which you should be fine with. Ultimately, the biggest issue that you have right now, Adam Amar, is the fact that you don't have a tight end. So maybe Mason is utilized in order to try to go get a tight end in that circumstance. Thank you. Seta says that I'm in an 8-team league now. Have Kyler, Jaden, Bijan Kamara, Montgomery, Brian Robinson, Garrett Wilson, Neighbors, Amon-Ra, Kupp, Bowers, McBride. Okay, so in order to kind of... All right, so now I understand why you asked for that question, Seta. Now it all kind of makes sense. With the additional context as to what your team comprises of, as a whole... Let me see, where's the prior team? I have to find it. Why can't I find it? What happened here? James Conner, Marvin Harris. Okay, yeah. With the context of the team that you currently have, you didn't give up too much. It's fine. Like at that point, you can afford to make 2-for-1 trades at that capacity. So at that point, yeah, I think that's a perfectly fine trade. Congrats, Seta. Pitch Herndon sends in a question. Says, ride out with Anthony Richardson or look for waiver. Yeah, look for waiver. Let's not get too cute with it. I think this upcoming weekend's matchup against Pittsburgh is not an easy one. So I would probably look in the direction of potentially picking up one of those waiver options that I suggested in terms of this week's video, whether it is a potential Sam Darnold, whether it is a potential for, if best case scenario is Andy Dalton, I'd still look into it, pick it up and have it available. If push comes to shove and we're, desperate times call for desperate measures, then we'll play them ahead of them. But otherwise, definitely look for an alternative option just to have on roster. Adam Amar sends in a follow-up, says, trade Brian Robinson and Eckler for ETN. I have Tank Bigsby. You're giving away 2 running backs that quite literally have top 30 value in order to get one that, when we talk about Brian Robinson versus ETN, are very comparable in terms of recent value. That's only if you truly believe that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to start stringing together victories, or at least be a more competitive team. Like when I look at the upcoming schedule for the Jaguars, they've got 4 competitive games, or at least games that which they could potentially win. Now, this upcoming week against the Texans, not so easy, but still can be a competitive game. Then they have the Colts, which, again, that defense is terrible. Then they have the Bears, which, again, the defense isn't bad, but the overall product of the team could lead to the Jaguars potentially winning. And then they have the Patriots. So if we believe that they're going to have a flip of the switch and they're going to be in a situation where they're winning games rather than losing, then I'm fine. But otherwise, I think you may be giving up a bit much if you need the running back depth, because you're giving away 2 for 1. If you don't need the running back depth, fine, let's make the move. Otherwise, keep as such. All right, Andy Wardlaw sends in a question. Says, my roster consists of Stevenson, J.K. Dobbins, Garrett Wilson, Rice, Ridley, Irving, Singletary, Najee Harris, Shakir. I'm number 3 on waivers. Who should I pick up and who should I drop? For Lazard, Juwan Johnson, Hubbard, Braylon Allen, Deontay Johnson, Adunze in order. Okay, very well. So considering what you mentioned you have, Stevenson, J.K. Dobbins, Garrett Wilson, Rice, Ridley, Irving, Singletary, Najee Shakir, none of those players theoretically can be dropped. Yeah, so that's the issue here. So unless you have somebody else that you're not mentioning, Andy Wardlaw, that you can theoretically drop, I don't think you can go for any of these players. Otherwise, if you somehow did have players that obviously didn't fit the word count, and maybe you do have some bench players that you can drop, great. Deontay Johnson's number one. Number two out of this group would then be Braylon Allen. Number three would be Rome Odunze. Number four would be... That's it. Those are the only three I want. The other couple of these options, technically, maybe you could start for 1 to 2 weeks, but I'm not too interested in it. Those are the three that I prioritize as of right now. Thank you. Jamel Joyner sends in a question. Says in a half PPR, I have Adams, Pittman, Ridley. Yeah, that's rough. BTJ was going to drop 2. Available are Deontay Johnson, Addison, Jennings, Rome Odunze. Okay, so I'd be willing to drop BTJ for Deontay Johnson. That I'd be willing to do. As for the rest of the field, I'm pretty confident that you have to keep. I'd be sick to my stomach if I dropped Pittman and Ridley and they started to go off. I'd be pretty sick to my stomach. So at this point, the only thing I can suggest is the BTJ for Deontay Johnson drop. Anything else that you do is on your own volition and on your own accord. Thank you. Nathan Ray says Chase Brown or Emmanuel Wilson with fab percentage. Josh Jacobs owner. Considering you have Josh Jacobs, it's probably smarter to have Emmanuel Wilson on roster just in case. You're probably spending 2-3%. I don't think you'll need more than that. I don't think people are going to be chomping at the bit to go after the second string running back of the Packers, who again is just purely a insurance policy rather than anything else. Let's see here. Shaheem says, PPR, should I trade Chase for Dobbins, Diggs, and Mason? Okay, so hear me out. If you have Christian McCaffrey and you're bringing in Mason for this and you need running back depth because, again, you are out of Christian McCaffrey, I would say yes. Otherwise, no thank you. Let's see here. We had a question from Cowboys9511 who says, started the season 0-3. Have the third most points scored in my league. Do I change it up or keep riding? Keep going. You're fine. Again, if you were 0-3 and you had the least amount of points in your league, at that point, I'd say we need to start moving. Otherwise, you're good. Legend Killer says, in a half PPR, I'm 0-3 currently. Should I trade Mahomes, Christian McCaffrey, Mason, and Evans for Allen, DJ Moore, AJ Brown, and Pollard? Okay, let me think about this. I'd be willing to do so. That's fine by me. Again, you don't get... So, yeah, I'm okay with that. I don't have any issue with it. I think the value between Mahomes and Allen is so vast, the differential as it currently stands. And I think by far and away, once AJ Brown is healthy, he clears Evans to the point to where if you're getting the additional depth of Moore and Pollard, it can sustain for the loss of a McCaffrey, Mason, whoever is in the starting lineup. So I'm fine with it. I don't have an issue with that at all. Michael Barton sends in a question, says pick 3 running backs, 1 and 2 and a flex. Okay, very well. We have Mason, Derrick Henry, Singletary, Akers, and Hubbard. I mean, again, Mason has to start every week. Henry has to start every week. So then it's just a matter of those alternative options between Singletary, Akers, and Hubbard. I mean, it's relatively close. In a full PPR, I would probably... It's a very, very enticing question. I think I probably feel more comfortable starting... The question is, do I want to play Singletary on a short week? Is he... Comparatively, full PPR... Especially off of the week that Hubbard is I think I probably play Hubbard there. I think I go Hubbard, Derrick Henry, and Mason right now. And then your follow-up question is also Hudson, good defense, question mark? Hudson? Or you mean Houston? You forgot the it's all good. Houston's a good... No, I don't... I mean, technically against Jacksonville, they could be a value, but I probably wouldn't roll with it. This week, should I play Darnold over Mahomes? Against the Packers defense or Mahomes versus the Chargers? I think I'd probably just play Mahomes against the Chargers. I'd feel comfortable with doing that. That's fine by me. Adrian sends in a question, says Bijan Robinson, Dobbins, Tank Dell for HN, Mondre, Ayuk. Who wins? In the long term, I prefer Bijan and Dobbins so much that I think it overtakes the value of Ayuk versus Tank. I'd probably just keep the Bijan Dobbins situation. If I could get more clarity on the Miami Dolphins situation with HN, I would say perhaps we can go in that direction, but I would need guarantees rather than the speculatory kind of situation that we're in. HBK Dom says, I have Adams, Burrow, Chase, Cook, Singletary, Evans, Shakir, and I'm in a 12-man full PPR league. Should I trade away Mike and start Shakir or keep Mike? Mike Evans is a keep. For sure. Again, he plays against Philadelphia this week. Expect him to have a monster performance. Expect him to be tomorrow's thumbnail. This is the buy low week of Mike Evans. After this week, it will probably be very difficult to buy low on him. Just like in the same way in which last week it was Jamar Chase. Thank you. Infinity and Bijan says the following. In a full PPR trade, Cup and Najee Harris for Jaden Reed and Jonathan Brooks. I probably wouldn't. Again, you'd have to be in a really, really, really desperate situation to be trading. Look, here's the thing. Jaden Reed's going to have value. Cooper Kupp takes a little bit of time to return, but then you're moving on from an RB2 that's a solid RB2 that hasn't found the end zone, but eventually will. Again, like I told you guys in the preseason, Najee Harris is really good. Once like week 6, 7 hit, after that, there are significantly, he has made his career out of being a weeks 6 through 14, week 6 through 17 monster. So that's when we would want to buy on Najee. So in this scenario, no, I'd probably keep what you have. Zhen says, thoughts on Kenneth Walker compared to Mixon or Jacobs? If Kenneth Walker's fully healthy and I don't have to worry about having Charbonnet on roster, I think there is a conversation to be had in terms of him being look, in the preseason, we already knew he was going to be more valuable than Mixon. As for his value in comparison to Jacobs, again, if he doesn't start scoring touchdowns, we're in trouble. Obviously, the Seahawks are a very competitive team. They were last year and the year prior. Now they have an actual defense, so it makes it that much easier to be able to run the ball effectively and get opportunities to run the ball in positive game script. So he could be arguably more valuable than the other two rest of the season. Just, of course, requires the health. God's Gang says Chicago, Titans, Green Bay, Colts, Saints rank. In terms of defenses for this week, Saints will be number 1. Titans will be number 2. Chicago will be number 3. Green Bay, Colts 4, Green Bay 5. Thank you. Baba Booey sends in a question. It says PPR, Moss in Sutton for Brian Robinson Jr. Moss is my RB3. I think I'd keep Moss Sutton. Thank you. Shahir sends in a question. Says, I have Allen Kamara Jones, Chase, Marvin Harrison Jr., Kincaid, Pollard, Ford, Kirk, Shakir, Hunt. I'm 3-0. Should I trade Ford for a buy low wide receiver? Absolutely. Yes. 100%. Good question, Shahir. But yes, you should do it. Jose Manuel sends in a question. Says, waiver, Chase Brown or Roshan Johnson? Have both Swift and Moss. Got it. I think there's a higher likelihood based on the lack of production from Swift that he could effectively lose his job. So, what's funny? I think Roshan Johnson has to be prioritized, and let me tell you why. Last season, we saw a former Eagles running back who had an incredible 2022 year go to a different team in 2023 and cash in on free agency. That player was someone that I liked a lot. Very similar to which I liked Swift this offseason. But both seem to be on the same kind of trajectory in terms of their career. That player I'm referring to is Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders went from the Eagles behind a great offensive line, then joins the Carolina Panthers and ruins his career, gets replaced midway through while he pipped by Chuba Hubbard and hasn't recovered since. This could be the case for DeAndre Swift. Plays for the Eagles, plays incredibly well, then goes to the Chicago Bears, hits a reality, hits a brick wall, and loses his job to Roshan Johnson by week 5. It's very much so in the realm of possibility. I suggest you pick up Roshan. All right, Punet Singh says, 10-team, full PPR, 6-point per passing touchdown. I have Mahomes, Bijan, Mason, Evans, Rice. Okay, so you got a pretty solid team. Forget Mahomes. Bijan, Mason, Evans, Rice, DK, Ayuk, Ingram, Reed, Ladd, Javante. Record is 1-2. Again, your record will improve. Obviously, you've had very much so up and down performances. Evans most recently. Rice is consistent. Bijan's going to be fine. DK's been great recently. Ayuk, again, still needs a little bit of time. Reed will go ahead and jump back into the conversation of potentially being a flexible option until Ayuk finds himself. I think you're in a pretty solid spot. Obviously, the quarterback position and tight end position are your biggest positional needs with the Ingram injury and the Mahomes lack of upside per se. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking for another quarterback, you could end up trying to move Mahomes alongside of one of these other options you potentially have in order to make a play. But I would keep it for now. I think you're in a pretty, I think you're in a solid position. Obviously, the first 2 weeks haven't panned out, but again, it's because your team hasn't produced in unison. They haven't had all great weeks in the same week. They've gone, they're alternating, which again is keeping you underwater. Jeremy Melendez says, question is below. Jeremy, I'd venture to say that your question is probably not in the live chat anymore. Never mind, it is. I found it. It says, I'm 0-3. I'm in a 12-man league, PPR flex, or 2 flex options. My team is Stroud, Wilson, Ridley, Gibbs, Ford, Laporta, Swift, Bowers. Wow. Okay. Bench is Keenan Allen, Wanda Robinson, Brooks, Braylon Allen. Any moves to make? Okay. So as it currently stands, Garrett Wilson's fine. Stroud, you'll be fine with that. Ridley is a disaster. Gibbs is fine. Ford is a ticking time bomb. Laporta is a disaster. Swift is a disaster. Bowers is great. So in your scenario here, you are probably looking to try to trade Ridley, Ford, Laporta, Swift, Wandell, and maybe even Keenan Allen. You're trying to move all of those pieces off of this team in order to recoup any sort of value. Even if it brings back no depth at all, we will just hit the waiver wire. But I think that needs to be probably accomplished here. You need to start moving pieces, keep Bowers, move Laporta. He's got a bigger name. If Bowers pulls in more trade capital, you have to hit that. I think you have to really just kind of re-rack your whole team and try to you have to restructure across the board and hit the shit out of the waivers because right now, it's panic mode in this circumstance. Why are there 5 Twitter notifications? What happened in like the last 40 minutes here? Thurman James, 1-game suspension is upheld. Derek, okay, that's irrelevant. I don't know what the heck that has to do with anything. Nothing. Okay, cool. Keep it moving. Thank you for the question, Jeremy. After Jeremy's question, we had one that came in from Corey Miller. Corey says the following 12-team PPR. I have Goff, Connor, Jones, Amon-Ra. Okay, so Goff, we need another quarterback on roster. Connor's fine. Jones is fine. Amon-Ra's fine. Olave's fine. London's fine. Kittle will get healthy. He'll be fine. Braylon Allen, Ford, Bucky, great. Rico, that's fine. Coleman, trade Coleman for Benson. Yes, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. Trade Coleman for Benson. Try to go pick up another quarterback off of the waivers. You'll need it. Joel Garza sends in a super chat. Nothing attached to it. Let me see if I can find the question. Garza says, got offered Kelsey for Bowers. Drop Javonte Williams for Chuba Hubbard or Deontay. I'd keep Bowers, legitimately. 1 week ago, I would have told you to trade for Kelsey, but right now I'm kind of gun shy on that. Drop Javonte for Chuba Hubbard or Deontay. Yeah, I dropped Javonte for Deontay Johnson. Thank you. If you had an opportunity to also pick up Chuba with somebody else and somehow he clears waivers and doesn't get picked up, try to even also go after that one. But Deontay would be the priority again. Lelexo sends in a question, says in a 12-team league, half PPR, start 2 running backs, 2 wide receiver, 2 wide receiver, 2 flex. My quarterback is Burrow and Goff. Okay, so Burrow's going to start henceforth because, again, they're in shootouts and they're playing relatively well as an offense. And, again, they're getting all their pieces back healthy, ready to go. You have Gibbs, Najee, Ford, Mostert, Spears. Okay, great. Gibbs has to start. Najee has to start within the given week. Going forward, in terms of the 2 wide receivers you'd play, Nico Collins and Neighbors are pretty stun locked in those positions. Until Debo returns, your flexes are going to be Reed and most likely Ford as of this week. And McBride, you probably need to pick up a waiver wire option, as that's my primary recommendation. So if you have to drop somebody, if it has to be Goff, so be it. And you try to go get Komet if he's available. Because again, if McBride is going to miss this week, it wouldn't be a bad idea to go pick up Komet. Let's say he pops off, then you can utilize him as trade leverage in another trade to a Mark Andrews owner or Kelsey, etc., Laporta in a future week. Thank you. Jose Rodriguez says, in a full PPR, I already have 2 Lions players, St. Brown, Montgomery, and in need of a running back, Laporta, Shakir, 4, Kincaid, Walker. Yeah, cool. Sounds great to me. I mean, I think you win that trade objectively in that circumstance. I'll take Kenneth Walker and Kincaid again, under the assumption that Kenneth Walker can stay healthy for the remainder of the season. I think that's a great trade. Thank you. SWRXL says, full PPR trade. Give Dobbins, Dowdle, Watson, Chiefs defense. I receive Najee Harris. Okay, hold up. Dobbins, Dowdle. Okay, so basically you're giving away Dobbins because everything else is kind of just trade fodder. And you're going to get Najee Harris, Zamir White, J-Mo, Steelers defense. So basically, you're giving away Dobbins, you're getting Najee and J-Mo, because I think also Zamir White and Steelers defense, trade fodder. So in this circumstance, yes, I'll take the trade. I'd prefer to have Najee, J-Mo rest of the season. I'd accept that. Thank you. Moving on, we had Rogo who sends in a question. Says, in a standard half PPR format, we have CJ Stroud, Stephon Diggs, Juwan Jennings, Montgomery, Mason, Kincaid, Gibbs, Moody. My bench consists of Baker, Higgins, Swift, Chase Brown, Debo, Mostert. Who to trade for? Yeah, look, okay, so as it currently stands, right, when I look at your team as a whole, considering you don't have Christian McCaffrey, I would like to try to move Mason, and considering you have Montgomery and Gibbs, you don't have to change running backs. You can start them every week for the remainder of the season. The only times you will need a running back in exchange for those two is when the bye week hits, which again is looming. It's just around the corner. Week 5 is going to hit a bye week. You're going to hit a wall, but that's fine. I don't think you need to trade out of the bye week. If you take a loss, you take a loss. So be it. It's just the nature of the beast. In the long run, Stroud, Diggs, Montgomery, Gibbs, good to go. Mason needs to move. You need to bring back any sort of value that you can. Even if it means moving like Mason with, for example, if you move Mason and Debo, because again, that's the only other high valued piece, to try to go get a wide receiver that's an upgrade from Debo, I think it would be worth it. Again, without Christian McCaffrey and or the possibility of trading for McCaffrey, you have to move this piece now. Now, I know you did say in your question, trade Gibbs for McCaffrey. I don't know if I'm willing to. There's so much inherent. Do I trade away Gibbs to get McCaffrey? Evans owner wants Jennings. If the Evan owner wants Jennings, let's go knock on the door and see if they want to give us Evans. As of right now, I'd probably be like, if they want Jennings and they'll take Jennings and some other lazy piece for Evans, you strike while the iron's hot. Otherwise, do I make the trade in which I give away Gibbs and get McCaffrey? I don't know McCaffrey's fate. I'd be losing running back depth theoretically. No, I don't make that trade. I think I just hold. I'd be too afraid to do so, legitimately. So at this point, just try to go see what it'll take to get the Evans offer completed. All right, let's see here. Genriquez says, half PPR. I'm 1 and 2. I have Josh Allen, Evans, Diggs, Ford, Swift, Laporta, White, Aubrey, Tampa Bay's defense. My bench consists of Carson Steele, Javonte Williams, Gus Edwards, Reed, Braylon Allen, Thielen, McCaffrey. Who do I drop? Cool. Gus Edwards can be dropped. I also believe that there's a conversation in which Tampa Bay's defense needs to be dropped. Additionally, we need to probably then prioritize picking up, considering you have Josh Allen, Evans, Diggs, Ford, Swift. You need to probably get Roschon Johnson on your roster here, and then probably another wide receiver for a little bit of extra depth, considering you lose Thielen for the next 3 weeks here. So drop Tampa Bay's defense, drop Gus Edwards, go pick up Roschon, and go pick up a wide receiver. Thank you. Yeet sends in a question, says, standard scoring. Who should I start? My running backs and wide receivers are JT, Dobbins, Braylon Allen, Moore, Ayuk, Deontay Johnson. I can mix and match in my starting lineup. Example, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, or 1 running back, 3 wide receiver. Got it. So you basically have a multi-flex league to where everything is flexible. Cool. Got it. So of the available options that you have, in a standard scoring format, I think it's probably, for sure, Jonathan Taylor has to play. And then I'd probably, with DJ Moore has to play. Deontay Johnson has to play. I want to play Ayuk against the Patriots. He's going to be pulling. I need 4 options. It's either Ayuk or I play Dobbins. If in fact Justin Herbert is healthy and plays, it'll be Dobbins. Otherwise, it's Ayuk. Thank you. Jesus sends in a question, or Jesus says, do I trade McLaurin for Ayuk? Yeah, I would. I know that it may seem like a risky trade? I don't think it is. I think I'd rather just objectively have Ayuk rest of the season. Thank you. Tyrell sends in a question. Tyrell, of the Game of Thrones. Where art thou question, Tyrell? Let me know when. Just type it in live chat. It'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Okay, so how long have we been here for? Nearly an hour. Yeah, about 58 minutes and 50 seconds. Again, typically, what I want to do is have these live streams be about an hour to an hour 15, hour 30. Sometimes it jumps into the 2-hour conversation, but again, I want to keep myself relatively mentally fresh as the season progresses, and I also don't want to sweat underneath these lights as they are murdering your boy. So, we'll answer a couple more questions for the next, I'd say, 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead and head out. I'll be back tomorrow with wide receiver rankings. Again, if you guys want up-to-date rankings for the remainder of the season, the Patreon is a way in which you can access that, or, of course, signing up via Underdog Fantasy, or just Underdog. Using code Andrew, making a first-time deposit minimum of $10. You get those rankings every single Sunday morning. Good to go. Tyrell Washington says the following. Says, in a 12-team league, I'm currently 0-3. I have Richardson. My running backs are Mixon, Pacheco. Wow, we're in trouble already. Najee, Eckler, Warren. My wide receivers are St. Brown, Ayuk, Deontay Johnson, Mooney, McConkey. My tight ends. Wow, you are literally been hit with the injury bug like no other. Holy crap. Okay, so how do we fix this? Pacheco needs to be traded. If Mixon doesn't play this week, he needs to be traded. Ayuk probably... You know what? Okay, currently 0-3. I don't want to panic here. But I would legitimately venture to say, Tyrell, that everyone on your team is expendable and tradable at the moment. You should not... You shouldn't ignore any potential exploration of a trade option, even if it means sending away St. Brown in order to come back with more value. Now, obviously, we don't want to move St. Brown. He's your most valuable piece. But if, in fact, you have to move Deontay Johnson, Pacheco, Mixon, it's probably... I mean, those are probably... Mooney could be moved. Anthony Richardson can be moved, and we can live with Carr rest of the season. So, no stone unturned. Let's go and let's knock on every door of all the players who, quite frankly, haven't played well. Mike Evans, ETNs, Kenneth Walker's. I mean, Jaden Reed's. I'm going to knock on all these doors to see what I can get back in return and try to re-rack your whole roster all together across the board. Jesse G says, question is below. Jesse, I have to look up your name because I don't see anything attached. Let's go Control F3 function. Jesse G. Jesse G says, I have Kamara, Cooks, Goff, AJ Brown, JSN, Ridley, Ertz, Najee, Thielen, 12-man half PPR. Should I try to trade and make an upgrade? Okay, look, Thielen's pretty much irrelevant at this point because he's on the IR. JT Kamara, do not move. Cooks can be dropped effectively. AJ Brown doesn't move. JSN's fine. How do you make... Okay, so technically, if you were looking for wide receiver depth, you could technically take one of the two of JT Kamara and try to go make a move for that. Ultimately... That's the thing. If you're going to trade away JT or Kamara, you better get back a top 5 wide receiver. So someone better be giving you back Lamb, Jefferson, St. Brown, or Chase. Unless that is going to happen, you kind of have to hold. Because otherwise, you've got really good strength across your running back board. Once AJ Brown is back and JSN and or Ridley, one of the two, kind of demonstrate consistency to the point to where you're fine. That's the way that you would improve wide receiver. You would take one of those stud running backs and you try to go get wide receiver there. Or you could theoretically take A.J. Brown now while injured and try to cash in on his value. But then again, I'd rather just hold because I know I'm getting back a top 5 wide receiver rest season. Okay, Jesse, thank you very much. Appreciate it. After Jesse G, we had Jamar Joseph, who says Steelers or Bears defense rest of season. The Steelers look like they're pretty legit, so I'll lean in that direction. Itoza says... PPR, drop Ford or Dowdle for Akers. Roshan, Kirk, Sutton, Myers, or Judy. Okay, so I'm not interested in Jacoby Myers or Jerry Judy. I like Cortland Sutton. I like Christian Kirk. I like Roshan Johnson. If I was in your position at this current moment in time, the only reason I'd be dropping Ford is if you had an abundance of running back depth. If you do not, okay, let me see what your team looks like. It says, my team is wide receiver heavy. My bench has Flowers and Adunze on it already. And my running backs are Walker, Kenneth Walker, J.K. Dobbins, and Pollard is my top 3 running backs. Okay, you're pretty solid at running back still, but in this circumstance, I probably don't drop Ford. I'd prefer to sell him in a trade potentially in a package. Now, if you're wide receiver heavy and you have Ford, maybe you go knock on the door of a Mike Evans and try to make an upgrade there, or theoretically go after a player like ETN and try to get another running back of that kind of stature. Now, as for the potential pickups here, I would drop Dowdle and just go for Sutton, but considering, again, you have Flowers on your bench, and I would never in any circumstance play Sutton over Flowers the rest of the season unless it was a special scenario, it's probably dropping Dowdle and picking up Roschon Johnson. Thank you. Ramon sends in a question. Says, 12-team half PPR, how do you feel about our Jacobs and Connor as RBs, as RB1 and 2, okay? Got Daniels, JJ, Chase, AJB. Would you like to trade and upgrade at running back? You've Daniels, JJ. Honestly, I think you keep the strength of your wide receivers and you just let those running backs sit as such. The advantage that you have a wide receiver is so much of a threat for your team that is what's going to separate the group. I'd rather just keep the wide receiver depth that you have on tap and just keep the running backs there, because I do think that Connor's going to be far better than he was last week. And he's already proven that thus far this season from weeks 1 through 2. And Jacobs will get better with the return of course, the one and only Jordan Love. Thank you. Rogo says, also, what do I do with Mostert taking up space? Yeah, I'd be willing to drop him. I would be. Again, that offense is yeah, I'd be willing to move it. Chief sends in a question, said, I had enough of Swift. Drop him for Allen or Irving. Either of the two. I'd put in... if you have the number 1 waiver, I'd be okay dropping him for either. If I had to pick long-term, I like, Braylon Allen more. It could be argued that Irving is more valuable, but I'll take Braylon Allen or Irving, either one. If you're not the number 1 waiver, put in for both of them and then keep it moving. Is Anthony Richardson worth holding in an 8-team league? I can grab Fields or Darnold. In an 8-team league, depending on how many bench spots you have, I think it's worth holding for one more week just to see if he's capable of anything. If not, again, yeah, you should probably start somebody else in the given week. Fields is not a bad option. Neither is Darnold. Calvin Ridley or Khalil Shakir rest of the season, half PPR. So you're basically asking me if I would drop Calvin Ridley for Khalil Shakir. Calvin Ridley is a better receiver, but he's obviously attached to a quarterback that is incapable of getting him the ball on a consistent enough basis. I would venture to say that Calvin Ridley will be better in time or as the season progresses, as Levis gets better. So will Calvin Ridley, but I do not mind the swap. If you were to do it, I'd say, yeah, great job. I mean, honestly, I don't mind it. Trade ideas for getting rid of Mark Andrews. I don't think you can get rid of him right now. He's coming off a week in which he had literally 0 points. So unless you somehow can swindle somebody, I think you have to hold on to him and wait for him to have a decent week and then trade him afterward. Vic84 sends in a super chat. Vic, nice to see you. Don't see anything attached to the question, so do me a favor and type in the chat, Vic. TanFam sends in a question, says, in a full PPR, 12 teams, should I trade away Garrett Wilson plus Flowers for CeeDee Lamb? My other wide receivers are Rice, Evans, and Kupp. Yeah, I would do it. I don't have an issue with that at all. Even though it may seem like you're giving up a lot, which you kind of are, you can technically afford to do so because you have so much unfucking believable depth of wide receiver. Like, I don't even know how you managed to get all these guys. Well done. Your running back must be thin because you got studs across the board at wide receiver. Drop Carr for Darnold as my backup quarterback. I don't have an issue with that. That's fine. I'd still venture to say that Carr will be better in time, but yeah, if you want to make the swap for Darnold, I have no issue with it at all. All right, let's see here. We are still looking for Vic84. Let me see if I look it up in the chat. Maybe it's in the upper parts of the chat, perhaps. It is. It says Connor, Jaden Daniels, Cooks, Adunze, Puka, Jonathan Brooks, CX. Okay, I don't know what that means. So yeah, do me a favor, Vic. Type it in the chat. Appreciate it. Let's see what the chat says. Agent Smith says, how about Richardson? Is he worth holding, or is it Darnold, Fields, or Rodgers time? At the moment, if you're playing in a 4-point per passing touchdown league, I'd probably say it's Fields time this week to start over him, but I don't think I'm dropping him yet. Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins. Should I pick up Jawan Jennings? Yes, please. You should. It'll fill in for the next 2 weeks here at very minimum. Let's see here. 5 Cool says, sent Daniels for Kupp and a PPR. I have Burrow. Yeah, that's cool. I have no issue with that at all. Obviously, you're waiting for the return of Kupp, but once you do, you get the investment kind of paying off. That's good. Anderson says, I'm new to fantasy. In a full PPR 12-team league, I have Dak Prescott, Gibbs, Walker, Tyreek Hill, Jefferson, Trey McBride, Evans. Okay, pretty good-looking team across the board here. Do I trade Mike Evans for Cooper Kupp? Do I trade Mike Evans for Cooper Kupp? Jefferson, Tyreek Hill? No, I don't think I do. Uh, Look, here's the thing. The issue that I have here with that theoretical trade is that when you bring in Cooper Kupp and he doesn't come back till week 7 or 8, and then additionally, you don't know what Tyreek Hill's fate is going to look like for the next 4 or 5 weeks here. You are leaving yourself relatively vulnerable at wide receiver for the next 4 to 5 games, which again, you want to win these games because it will, again, if you can start off hot, it will carry you for the majority of the season. So in this circumstance, probably just like to keep the depth while, of course, you're still trying to figure out what to do with Tyreek Hill and the Tua Tagovailoa situation. Easy E sends in a question, says suggestions on Superflex, 3 wide receiver league. Quarterbacks are Murray, Daniels. Wide receivers are CeeDee Lamb, Neighbors, Godwin, Kupp, Dell. Running backs are Jacobs, Walker, Montgomery, Brooks. Tight end is Kincaid, Prater, Minnesota, Buffalo are my defenses. Easy E, honestly, I wouldn't make any suggestions. You're playing in a quite literal super flex league. Your quarterbacks are studs, your wide receivers are studs, your running backs are solid and only get better as time progresses with Walker coming back and Brooks coming back. I legitimately would not tell you to move anything. I think this is actually a really fucking good team. Really, all you need is for Kincaid to play well and you are set. And I wouldn't make any trades for another tight end because quite literally, there aren't very many good tight ends as it currently stands across the entire landscape. So you'd be overpaying for value that, quite frankly, you can still find within Kincaid at the moment. Vic84 says, help, I'm currently 0-3. I need a top wide receiver. Which wide receiver can I trade based on my current roster? Got it. Your roster consists of Burrow, Pittman, T. Higgins, Hall, Kamara, Ferguson, Pollard, Laporta, Connor. Okay, cool. Again, I think it's a really good idea to trade for Evans right now. If you could take Pollard and make that swap, you should do so. That's what I'm thinking off the top of my head. Outside of that, is there any other wide receivers that you can theoretically grab right now that are going to be immediate values? Like, yeah, I would just, let's focus on Evans for now. All right, let's hear. Craigslist says, in a 10-team half PPR league, I'm in first place. Use my second priority on Irving, Love, use my number 2 priority on Irving, Love, or other, or save it for the future. Bye week for Hurts is week 5. On the bench, I have Allen, JMO, and Benson. Got it. So, in your circumstance, I would not burn my number 2 waiver on Jordan Love unless you can trade him. I would rather burn it on Irving. I would burn it on Irving. I think there's a possibility that Irving could literally just pull the rug out from underneath Rachaad White based on how he's played. Would you guys trade Lamb for James Cook and Brian Thomas Jr.? No, I'd rather have Lamb. Unless if I'm going to move Lamb, I better be getting back Bijan. Like, I better be getting back legit premier talent. I'm not getting, some low-end wide receiver or RB1 that might get touchdowns yoinked from him. I want studs. David Daniel says, I'm 2-1 right now. I have T. Higgins, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas Jr. Okay, it's not even you have. This is a trade. T. Higgins, Odunze, Brian Thomas Jr. for Adams and JSN. Also Jennings. Okay, hold up. First and foremost for the question. Long-term value, Adams is the most valuable piece in this group. You would only ever make this trade if you can afford to lose 3 wide receivers of that caliber, David Daniel. So technically, I don't mind the trade, but it's, again, very much so dependent on what your current or who you would be left with at wide receiver for the remainder of the season. It says also, I have Jennings, Mooney, Waddle. Yeah, with that into consideration now, I think I'd keep what you have. Unless JSN is going to be a consistent option, I'd rather have the depth, the wide receiver, just to be able to mix and match on matchups going forward with the potential when Odunze and or Brian Thomas Jr. put forth and Higgins getting better. Obviously, yesterday wasn't the greatest showing, but also had himself opportunities to score questionable defensive pass interference holding calls. Let's see here. Duro Modi says in a question, sup, Andrew? Trade my DJ Moore for Bucky and Pacheco. Getting tired of the Bears situation. No, I don't think I do that. Maybe you're like, hey, Andrew, listen, I got stud wide receivers across the board. I got Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison, Olave, and Evans, and I don't need DJ Moore. I just want the running back depth that I'll be able to cash in on once Pacheco comes back. I could justify it then, but ultimately, I don't know if I love this trade. Like, Bucky's okay in this circumstance, but you don't get Pacheco back until week 11, maybe, at best case scenario. So, and even then, we don't even know what kind of Pacheco we're going to see at that point. It could be like a shell-shocked Pacheco because of the injury. So, very much so dependent on your roster. And if you would like that trade, I don't mind it, but I don't love it. All right, last couple of questions here. It says also trade Kyron Williams trade Mike, Kyron Williams, and DJ Moore for Evans and Gibbs. I'd probably really good question, actually. I think I keep what you have. Again, I'm not too tired with the DJ Moore situation yet. 25 sends in a question, says full PPR, start Neighbors or Juwan Jennings as of a wide receiver 2. I don't think you got to play them both. You'd have to find a way to play them both. I think you do. I don't know if I'm actually benching Malik Neighbors ever again. I don't think I'll ever have him outside of my top 20 wide receiver rankings based on what he's just accomplished against some really good secondaries. Or last week was good secondary, or perceivably good. Gio Ortiz says start two, 1 flex. Okay, very well. Olave, Rice, Deontay Johnson, Jennings, Rome, JSN. I think this decision is like pre-made for you. Rice always has to play, no matter what, until the end of time, until he's no longer the number 1 target of Mahomes, or until he's suspended next season. So in this overall scenario, it then becomes Olave versus the Falcons and or Deontay Johnson versus Cincinnati, Jennings versus the Patriots. In this scenario, geez Louise, do I start to Ben? Oh my God. I'm going to probably lean towards the direction of playing Olave, Rice, Deontay Johnson. I think Jennings' matchup this week will be far more difficult and less upside worthy than it was this last week of 41 points. Paul sends in a question, says, would you trade away Jefferson for Evans and Montgomery? Drop Demarcus Robinson for... Okay, I would drop Demarcus Robinson for Roschon Johnson. Now, as for Jefferson, for Evans and Montgomery, if you need a running back, yes, I'll make that move. Zoe sends in a question, says, I'm 0-3 currently. I have Allen, Montgomery, Connor Jennings. St. Brown, Laporta, and Steele in my flex. My bench consists of Hunt, Jackson Smith, Waddle, Likely, and Zamir. Okay, so Allen's cool, Montgomery's cool, Connor's cool, Jennings will be a short-term fix, St. Brown's great, Laporta in time will be better. Otherwise, you got pretty good, bench depth with Waddle and Njigba, and of course Hunt. Of course, until we figure out what that looks like in terms of that overall running back rotation, I'm not really making any moves in this scenario. I think you're perfectly fine. I think obviously you need a better wide receiver too, but you'll be able to buy time until Tua potentially returns. Ibrahim says you missed my super chat. Did I? Let me go ahead and check. One moment, please. So if I go here, Ibrahim, yes, I did. Apologies, Ibrahim. Says trade Deontay Johnson and Kenneth Walker for Nico Collins. My running backs are Bijan, Brees, Brian Robinson Jr., Mason, Devin Singletary. My receivers are Devontae Waddle, Tankina. I think giving away Kenneth Walker. I think you can afford to make this trade. I'd like to get more out of it. I think Nico Collins is a stud wide receiver. I'd love to get maybe A.J. Brown or something of that extent, but if you can't, because again, the injury and or maybe they're just not interested, I'd love to even give more than what you're... Like, let's say, for example, you give Kenneth Walker or maybe even a better running back, or I don't know if you can technically afford to do it, though. You don't want to give away Bijan or Brees, so you keep them both. Like Kenneth Walker and Deontay Johnson, if the most that they can pull back or get in return is Nico, then that's fine. But otherwise, if I was in your position, I wouldn't make this deal. I would take Brian Robinson, Mason, Singletary, and whatever else you have a wide receiver and go ship all of that for a better wide receiver. I wouldn't be willing to compromise the loss of a Kenneth Walker when I can take all these other pieces, go offer Brian Robinson Jr., Mason, and whatever the heck else they want, Deontay Johnson, give a 3-for-1 and make a deal of that capacity. If they don't want Mason and they want Brian Robinson, Devin Singletary, and Deontay, I'd rather do something of that exchange. Thank you, Ibrahim. All right, final couple questions here before we close out today's stream. Again, thank you guys for joining us. Let's see here. We had God's Gang who says the following. Are we dropping Pacheco? No. I have an IR. I have him in the IR spot. Yeah, you're good. Do not drop Pacheco. Never. If you drop Pacheco, you're forfeiting value, theoretically. 25 sends in a question, says, I have Collins, Neighbors, Olave, and Jennings as wide receivers. Okay? I have Kamara, Mason, and Connor. Who do I start? I'm so conflicted. Collins has to start, Neighbors has to start, Kamara has to start, Mason has to start, and your flex in a half PPR theoretically is Connor. So you'd basically be sitting Olave and Jennings, unless it's a 2-flex league, in which in that position you're benching Jennings, which sucks. But maybe you just trade him before you have to make that eventual decision. Maddie says my question's in the chat. Very well. PPR. I need help with running backs for the inconsistency and the IR. I have Pacheco, Christian McCaffrey. I have Mason. Okay, Mason Achan, JT. Is that what it says? Pick up Montgomery and Aaron Jones. Should I pick one or both? Drop Pacheco. Recruit is 1 and 2. Okay, I'm very confused as to how this question is kind of built out, Maddie. So have Pacheco / McCaffrey. Done. My running backs equal Mason, Achan, and it literally says JT. Pick up Montgomery and Aaron Jones. So are they available? Is this a smaller team league? It's like a 4-team league where they're potentially available off waivers. If that's the case, then yes, you would. If you're playing in a small league, you would drop Achan. You would pick up these other potential options. Yes. But if it's not, then I don't know what you're talking about. You'd have to give me a little bit more, kind of constructive. Yeah, I don't get it. I need more context. Adunze or Chuba Hubbard off waivers? Long term, it's Adunze there. Champagne. Let's see here. Zhan says, if McBride is out, Fab on Komet would trade later. 11%? 12%? Nothing more than that. But that's also because of your need at tight end. Me, Waddle, JSN, Bijan, 4. DJ Moore, Montgomery, Rice. Okay, my only concern here is if Tua does come back and Waddle goes back to scoring 15 fantasy points per game. Theoretically, Montgomery's been great. Rice has been even better. DJ Moore would outproduce JSN. I'd be okay with it. And because of the uncertainty of Waddle, I'm fine with the trade. Thank you. Okay, a couple more here. Craig's List says 10-team, half PPR, Hurts, Hall, Mason, Connor, ETN, Lamb, London, Ferguson, JMO, Allen, Benson, Dallas. Who all to pick up off waivers? I mean, look, in terms of dropping people from your bench to the waivers, I'm not really dropping anybody. If you were going to pick up players and you somehow had an available spot, because again, I'm not dropping any of these players, at very best, you probably want to get another running back. Nope, you don't need it. You need a wide receiver. Nope, you don't need that either. You're pretty much set. I don't think you need to make any moves. If you want to pick up like Deontay Johnson, maybe he's available in your waivers, then you pick him up. But I wouldn't really suggest dropping any of these options theoretically. Nathan Ray says, team QB, number 1 waiver. Jones, Geno. Okay, so Daniel Jones, Geno Smith, Fields, or Dalton. 6 point per passing touchdown. I'd rather have Geno on this team. Thank you. Oscar says, I'm 1 and 2 in a 12-team PPR. Need some help. My quarterback is Anthony Richardson. My wide receivers are Amon-Ra St. Brown, Evans, Debo Jennings. Very well. Wide running backs are Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs, Chase Brown, Braylon Allen, Jalen Wright, Guerendo, Chubb, and Brooks. How much fab for Chuba Hubbard? In this scenario, I don't think you theoretically need Chuba Hubbard, but considering you do have Brooks, I'd be willing to drop like Jalen Wright or the other running back for the 49ers. How much fab would I be utilizing on it? Again, because you have Brooks, you are more inclined to not spend as much fab as others. So if at very most you want to spend maybe 8 to 10%, you can get away with it. But I wouldn't say to go out and drop like 15 to 20. I think it's not necessary in your circumstance, considering the running back depth you currently have, and additionally Jonathan Brooks that you will go ahead and recoup value with later once he is off the injured reserve. Let's see here. Okay. Good. Okay. That's pretty much where I'm going to call it. Thank you everybody for watching. Again, typically want to keep these streams about an hour and a half. We're an hour and 22 minutes, almost 23 into the stream. I appreciate y'all. I'll be back tomorrow with my top 40 wide receiver rankings. Again, if you guys want questions answered at a maximum rate, you can check out the Patreon, or if you want my Sunday morning rankings for the remainder of the season, check out Underdog. Link down in the description. All the information is down there in regards to that. And again, I mentioned it on any video. So if you guys are interested in getting more details in that regard, appreciate it. Check that out. If I wasn't able to answer your question, again, I apologize in advance. There's a lot of you and only one of me. And we are very much so limited on time constraints. So apologies in advance. I will be back tomorrow. And of course, the next day, streaming every day for the remainder of the season. So I appreciate y'all. That's pretty much where I'm going to call it. I'm going to cue the music of the double helix. Have a great rest of your wonderful night. And hopefully the waivers pan out. See you guys. Peace.